Today my guest on Songwriting for Songwriters is the brilliant Beth Nielsen Chapman. Beth was inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2016. She was a 2-time Grammy Award and ACM Award nominee and won the Country Music Association Award for Song of the Year for writing Faith Hill's This Kiss. We speak about Beth's pure love for songwriting. She offers up some great wisdom and advice for songwriters. We speak about her influences, what inspires her, collaboration, and much, much more. So please enjoy this podcast. Remember to subscribe. Please share with any friends you think might like these podcast series. And enjoy Beth's music from her website. Today on my Songwriting for Songwriters podcast, I have the amazing Beth Nielsen Chapman. How are you, Beth?
I'm great. It's good to be here. Love talking about my favorite subject.
Yeah, mine too. As a songwriter, mine too. So, the idea for this podcast was really to deep dive what we love and, to gather knowledge and shared experience and the mystery of song, really. So I was reading an interview with you this morning in which you said that you spoke about how sometimes you can write a song and then later on in life that song can almost be prophetic, like it's something which comes true later in life. And one of the questions I've kind of spoken about with other songwriters is their belief in like whether there's a songwriting muse or what they are connecting to. So when you spoke about that kind of prophetic element to your writing, where does that come from, do you think, if anywhere? What do you think is going on with that?
Well, I have a very crazy sort of view of what creative flow is. So, and when I teach a workshop on songwriting or creativity, I start off with this notion to try to, impart to folks that if we don't think of creativity as something you have or you don't have, like some people say, well, I'm not creative. I wish I was. I can't do it, blah, blah, blah. What they're doing is they're creating language in their head that's literally taking the creative flow and pushing it back. Yeah. So I think it's quite mystical. I've written entire albums wondering where did that song come from? And I follow the song. I kind of follow the song blindly, not really knowing or needing to know what exactly caused it. Yeah. I just want it to be coherent when I finish it. I want it to be something that isn't confusing about what it is. But there's a way that songs have taken on a different dimension. Like, for instance, I did an album called Deeper Still, and the last day of mixing that album, I found out I had breast cancer. And I didn't think about it in terms of breast cancer or going through breast cancer when I wrote the songs, or even after I finished the album and I found out I had breast cancer. It took me till like the next year when I was recovering from my treatments, and I went back and I was getting ready to now release the album that I had to pause to get well. And I listened to the songs again and I thought, oh my God, all of these songs were written. Now I can see how much they are about the journey that I just went on, all the fear and letting go and all the stuff, all the emotions. And it hadn't been the first time that happened. So it's happened pretty regularly. And I've had people say, well, don't get worried when you're writing a really sad song. I'm like, well, like sometimes it's interesting, but I think of creativity as something that's more like the air around us. Yeah. And there is within that air around us a kind of a way you can tap in to a space of sort of collective wisdom. Yeah. And creativity to me, I mean, if I were to just try to put it in a nutshell, it's sort of like God breathing. And it breathes through everything. Like plant a seed, it'll grow. Leave your sandwich on the piano, it will mold. Creativity will happen regardless of whether or not you think it just doesn't stop. So what stops it is that if you don't open to it, it doesn't just come and find you, and songs don't make you write them. You have to open to writing them. Sure. So I think a lot of the process for me is very ethereal. Yeah. And at the same time, I have written enough songs and studied the craft to the point where I'm very greedy about, like, I want it to be a perfect rhyme if possible. And I want it to be the melody to really fit the words. And I want it to sound like something that somebody would have said in a conversation. I don't want it to sound like a songwriter wrote it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways that when I listen to songs from students, they'll have lines in there where they're trying to give information. So they'll be in a conversation and they're singing to a person and they're saying, you came in last night and you sat down and you told me this and you did that, and then we had dinner and then you asked me to marry you. And then I'm like, why are you telling that person something they were there for? I mean, weren't they there? I mean,
Yeah.
are they brain dead? And all of a sudden you go, oh, well, I'm just trying to write a song. I'm like, yeah, I know, I can smell a songwriter. So I find that the creative process is a gift we all have.
Yeah.
And then if we start to learn how to dance with it, there's a million ways you can improve your craft, which is very important to do. But I try to encourage people writing songs not to think about the craft. Don't worry about all the fine tuning stuff. Just play. It's like getting in the sandbox, and I just throw chords around and throw words around, and I even write nonsense syllables that don't make any sense just to move my voice into the melody. And it's like jumping out of an airplane, and
Yeah,
seeing where you land.
I totally get that. I mean, one of the things that happens for me is sometimes I walk past the piano or guitar, and it's as if the piano or guitar will almost like whistle at me, and I'll get a feeling like now. And so I'll go over, and invariably the kind of signature chord sequence or riff will come within the first like minute, and then it'll want me to walk away from it. But it's quite kind of I've always found that kind of I suppose that's something which has developed over the years, because in the beginning we all sit down to write songs and copy our favorite songwriters, but as I kind of grew as a songwriter, really now my process is completely getting out of the way until that moment happens, and then, like you say, apply the craft after you've got that initial seed, then go to work at it like you're kind of a laborer, or doing it that way.
Well, I try to get as much of it down in that first stage where I'm not judging it, and I'm just, okay, well, that's cool. I'm gonna try it going from this angle, and I'll record the whole time, because if I don't have something in record, most of the time when the really good stuff comes through, I'm not consciously noticing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm aware, but I'm not really attributing it as being anything. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in a co-writing situation and I'm just going, well, this isn't the line, but something like this. And I blurt something out and they go, no, that's great. And I'm like, is it? And I have to take a minute and go, wait, that is great. Oh my God, that's perfect. But I didn't think it. It just kind of went, Pew! And again, I think much of it is, I just say, I imagine that all the songs are perfectly written and they're already neatly stacked up, waiting for us to download them in layers. And if you don't show up and play, then you don't pull it in. And the other thing I make my students do is I'll listen to a song that they're playing me. And when I listen to a song, I am critiquing. I have my more analytical hat on, but I'm looking for, is it airtight? Do I know who's talking to who about what and why? Any of those questions answered is a good thing. And then I'll just say, well, this section here is really good. Why is the next section not as good? So therefore we know you can write this good. So there's no reason that this section shouldn't be as good as that section. So I'll say the second verse, I think you should take the second verse, lift it out of there, put it over here on the altar of things that aren't going anywhere, which I have an imaginary altar to put the lines that I'm very attached to that I want to consider rewriting. But you literally have to take it out of your song physically and then either reprint or design the lyric sheet, even if you're working on a computer with a hole in it.
Yeah. Nice.
Now look at that thing again. And you have to have a physical space where there's nothing, because the creative flow loves a void. And if it's full of words that are already there, even if you're trying to rewrite them, I'll literally hit the return until there's a space. Okay, there's that verse. I'm going to try another one. And I'll make my students write not just one verse. I'll say you have to write no less than 5.
Wow. Okay.
Brand new verses.
Yeah.
And then there's a part of the brain that's going, well, wait, I totally rewrote the second verse now. I love the thing I came up with so much better. I'm done. I'm like, no, you're not done until you write me 4 more.
Okay, that's cool.
And it's absurd, to ask your brain to do that. But what happens is you exercise the muscle of reaching beyond
Yeah.
where there's so much more good stuff.
Yeah. Well, do you know we didn't we met briefly online with one of Chris Difford's songwriting workshops during the pandemic, and I
I
didn't.
thought you looked familiar.
Yeah, I didn't get to write with you, but when you were talking about critiquing, I wrote a song called "Losing the Girl" with a brilliant artist called Ruby Dew, and when it came around to the
Oh, I
end,
love Ruby.
it
Yeah, I
was
love
great.
Ruby.
And when we came around to
Yeah.
playing the song, it was the sort of structure of it and the chord sequence was something I had a long time ago, and I called the song "Losing the Boy," and then we wrote the lyrics together, and we wrote a song called "Losing the Girl." But you were really great because right at the end, when it came to like the critique part, you just mentioned one word or two, one or two words that could have been changed, just to slightly change one line, and the impact of that suggestion was like devastatingly beautiful. Like it literally changed the entire kind of verse. And so I
Oh,
remember
fantastic.
when you said that, it was just like, here is somebody who is really listening to these songs. You know, it's not just like
Oh, yeah.
by, she is really listening as a music fan, but as a songwriter, she is here, she's turned up, she's present, and she is listening to everything. And you can hear that in your songwriting. You know, it all feels very well arranged, but very natural as well. So you can kind of hear that craft that in your work, I think, which is special.
Yeah, I want it to be very conversational, and I also want it to be coherent. I think those two things have to be there for me to feel like the song has got a reason to exist.
Yeah, sure.
And there's a lot of amazing poetic ways that one can put a line in a song. And it's almost like I don't have a particular exact way of saying what works and what doesn't. I just have to hear it.
Yeah.
For instance, I love to cite Townes Van Zant's song, "All If I Needed You." I don't know if you're familiar with that song, but it's been recorded multitudes of times. It breaks tons of rules.
Yeah.
It's recorded by Emmylou Harris and a million other people. And the reason it breaks rules is because it only has one melody that goes around and around. It's one verse, doesn't have a chorus, doesn't have a B section,
Okay.
doesn't have anything that changes.
Yeah.
And if you said to me, "Oh, I've got this song, it just has these four lines that go around and around," I'm like, you might want it to go somewhere and come back, So, and then it's totally coherent while also introducing characters, like in the third verse, that he doesn't explain who they are.
Okay.
And he's talking about Luke and Lil, these two parakeets, but I don't know they're parakeets. It's not in the song. But when I heard the song the first time, I loved the song so much, and I wouldn't have changed one word. And I cannot defend why that is, because several of the things, if you played me a song and it had those elements, but then all of a sudden you start talking about Luke and Lil in the third verse, but I don't have any context and what have they got to do it? I would be attacking your third verse normally.
Sure.
So there are things that transcend all of the craft. And if it's that good, all I know is it's in.
Maybe as well, sometimes it's the commitment of the choice. You know, if somebody's made that commitment to kind of, they're going to say this, they've thought about it, but they're deciding, even though it may not make complete sense, they're going to really commit to that. I always like that thing about Paul McCartney writing "Hey Jude" with the movement you need is on your shoulder line, which he went to John and said, I'll change that. And John says, no, keep it in. That's the best line in the song. And in a sense, the movement you need on your shoulder.
But that's a transcendent.
Yeah.
But that's a transcendent line.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that's one of those lines that I don't know why I can say no. I would not vote that line out, nor would I vote out. Paul Simon has a great line in one of his songs on the Graceland album, and it's "She wore diamonds in the soles of her shoes." It's like so many aspects to that line that are so brilliant. So, I go through all this thing and I'm like, no, you got to have this, you got to do that. You got the craft voice, the critique part of my brain is very, very sharpened from many years of critiquing many, many songs and my own songs. But the transcendent writings, it's usually fed by melody. It's like the melody is so perfect and the syllables are perfect and the meaning is ethereal but very communicated. I knew when I heard, Luke and Lil agree. Like, I don't know. Do you know that song? The song "If I Needed You"? It's beautiful. It's like, if I needed you, would you come to me? Would you come to me for to ease my pain? That's the entire melody over and over.
Okay.
And that melody will suck you in, and you're like, I'll do whatever you say, when you hear that melody.
Yes,
And then he gets, Luke and Lil agree, da 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 da. And all I know is I don't know who Luke and Lil are, but I want to be in this movie. I want this song to be not changed at all.
Yeah.
So I can't explain it, but there are these transcendent kinds of writing. But a lot of students will come to me and go, well, I don't care if it doesn't make sense. I'm like, well, enjoy playing it for your grandchildren, because it's not transcendent enough in other ways to make no sense,
Yeah.
So I can be a real songwriting bully, but a nice bully.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You kind of, I mean, you're only applying the same level of bully, if you like, to your own songwriting. So it's like you're just being honest.
Oh yeah,
it's the same thing that we do, to each other.
Yeah, I'm harder on myself than anybody.
Yeah. Well, you kind of have to be, don't you? Because it's like it's your song, and it's gonna, your name is on it, and also it's that thing of commitment to the song, as if it's, I don't know, it's just something you really have to commit to, isn't it? To you've been given the opportunity to have this piece of music, so you feel like you need to really go with it the full way.
And I get asked this question, how do you absolutely know a song is finished? And I'm like, I absolutely never know a song is finished. I've had songs on the radio that I'm still going, oh, I should have said this there. Oh, that would have been better. I think that
I heard Glenn Campbell say, sorry, not Glenn Campbell. I heard his name escaped my mind. The guy who wrote Wichita Lineman. He was that.
He's a friend of mine. Glenn Campbell actually recorded it.
Yes.
Jimmy Webb. Sorry.
Jimmy Webb, of course, yeah.
His name. Actually sang at Jimmy Webb's wedding.
Oh wow.
He's a friend of mine. He's one of the most incredible songwriters of all time, but I got to be friends with him.
Fantastic. I read somewhere him saying that he didn't feel like he'd finished Wichita Lineman. It was just it got recorded, but you kind of see that, you kind of sense, I know what you mean, but I'm kind of glad you didn't, because there's a kind of elusive quality where you know enough, but there's a little bit of a mystery, which is also there.
It just lives completely in full finished form to me. It's just an amazing song. I got asked to be on a panel one time, and there was a bunch of 30-somethings in the audience, and it was for there was a film called Napster that came out, I think, around 2012. It's been a while, but it was all about how the streaming things kicked off, and the whole music industry changed with Napster and all that stuff. And on the panel was like somebody represented from Spotify and Apple Music and all the streaming services and YouTube and all the guys that kind of ran off with the goods.
Yeah. Nice.
And I'm the token singer-songwriter at the end of the line of the panel, right? So what struck me was that all through the entire discussion, they would refer to music as content and files.
Yeah.
Well, the files and the algorithm and the content and the files. And when it got down to me, I only had about 30 seconds left before the thing was going to be over. So I had to think fast, right? Like, how am I gonna communicate to these people the value of the song, which is the backbone of the entire music industry? So it needs to be compensated for accordingly, right? So I just got the microphone and I just went, I am a lineman for the county, and I drive the main road, searching in the sun for another overload. And you could hear a pin drop. Like all those kids out there that were halfway watching their phones and halfway watching the lecture.
Yeah.
Literally looked up like, what was that?
Good.
And then I stopped singing and I said, what just happened? Why is everybody looking so focused on me right now? I'll tell you what just happened. A song. Now, you may not have ever heard that song, or you might know that song, but that song is a piece of art. Yeah. And it made you look up from your phone. Not my voice, the song. And they actually burst into applause. And it was like, this is the thing that you have to not lose. You have to remember and know as this next generation, or you're going to have a bunch of really boring songs, because you got to be able to feed Jimmy Webb when he's 20. You got to be able to feed the people that write these songs, or you're not going to have any more. You're going to have a bunch of lame brain, blah, blah, office songs. I call them office songs, when people just go, okay, let's write a song. But
Yes.
Jimmy Webb was and is a genius, and that kind of thing, it just, we
Well,
have to nurture.
that was such a beautifully illustrated point you made there. Well done at that conference, because you're right. And also the thing that you just said is that those kind of office songs, or you hear it a lot on the radio in the UK, songs which they're fine and they're getting mainstream
Yeah.
hits, and it's fine, but you're not, your heart isn't open, your brain's not blown. It's just kind of photocopied versions of things that sell quite well, that have been photocopied and photocopied. But Wichita Lineman, for example, is like completely out of a different stratosphere. And we can't all write or expect Wichita Lineman, but it does seem to me that there's a little bit of a kind of watering down of songwriting in mainstream radio, and ideally,
I think that's always been. Yeah,
you think always been.
I think that's always been.
I do.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I think that when it was more condensed, because there wasn't as much, there just wasn't as much. There weren't as many radio stations. There wasn't as much of a business of it. In the 60s, when I grew up, we had like 3 radio stations and 3 television stations. So if you were watching the news, you were watching the news from very sort of focused source.
Yeah.
And now, we have this vast chaos because it's all over the place. But a great song still is a great song. And this is where this is where once I've demolished people's sense of hope, I go, but wait, you can sit in a room with a guitar and you can create something that will slam through doors, that will get in a movie. You can do that. You don't ever have to give up that dream. It is a lot more chaotic right now, but you should be doing your work. You should be doing your body of work as a songwriter the way that Van Gogh painted. He
Yeah.
didn't paint because people bought his paint. He painted because he had to paint, and he had to keep painting. And I think he sold one painting to his brother his entire life. And if he had just woken up one morning and said, you know what, this isn't really paying off, I think I'm going to go do something else, that would have been a horrible loss for the rest of us.
Absolutely.
And I just feel like when you say, nobody could have written Wichita Lineman but Jimmy Webb at that moment in time. But nobody could write your Wichita Lineman except you at this moment in time, coming from you. Mine would be different. Yours would be different. And that's the other thing I try to sort of instill. Songwriters by definition are sort of lacking in some self-confidence, usually at their very core, which is part of the reason that they're songwriters.
Absolutely.
And I said, you're allowed to, compare yourself to Joni Mitchell and James Taylor and go, oh my God, why would I even bother to write? But you got to get over that, because you have this little piece of real estate that is literally one place in history and one point in all existence, which is you looking out from behind your eyes.
Yeah.
Nobody can tell your story the way you can tell your story. And your story, if you don't think it's interesting, then you're wrong, because literally every human being, especially the ones that don't go around boasting, people that are having an experience, if you could put it into words and share your experience, or music, or a painting, or whatever form your art takes, what you're doing is you're giving something back from that tiny little piece of real estate that is so precious because it only exists coming from you.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anywhere else. It can't exist anywhere else. And when that piece of art has some coherence to it, it is valuable, and it is brilliant, and it is unstoppable, even if it goes into the howling hurricane of all existence. And only 2,000 years later, when they find your notebooks, a la Van Gogh, do they discover you. The thing that's so weird about it is you really lose a lot of the energy of this magical connection if you get caught up in, I have to be successful.
Yes, you do. Absolutely do.
I have to be successful. You do have to feed your family, but if your songwriting is attached to, I have to be successful in order for me to feel like I have a point in doing it, then you're going to lose part of the ticket to get in. I
Part
don't
of who
know.
you
I'm
are.
mixing metaphors on you.
No, that's true though,
Huh?
because I mean, you lose part of who you are if you're trying to do right for successes, as with the aim of success. Like you said, you lose who you are in that one moment of time. And interestingly, you brought Van Gogh
Right.
up. My daughter bought me a book of letters between him and his brother. And you're absolutely right that the man was committed to painting. You know, he really was. And his lack of success definitely did haunt him, or he, felt unsuccessful. But he was there every day, writing, painting those paintings. And you have, I think, if you're a real songwriter, from my point of view, there's nothing else you can do. It's not about success. It's like you have to do it because it is who
Yeah.
you are. And so whether you're living in a tent or a 10 million pound house, you're still going to need to write that song. So it's
Yeah. And as a professional songwriter, when I've been signed to a publisher, there are situations where they say, we need a song for so and so. It needs to be up tempo. It needs to be about a truck or whatever. That's okay to do.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
But if you don't do that with the full breadth of your songwriting
yeah,
identity,
yes,
then the song will be kind of like, it
yes,
really won't hit the mark.
yeah,
But, when I got asked to write a song for Willie Nelson back in the day, I had just come off the success of my first single, which was called Strong Enough to Bend. And it had been a big hit for Tanya Tucker, which I wrote it with Don Schlitz. And it was nominated for Song of the Year. And all of a sudden, my phone started ringing. And one of the people that called me was Fred Foster, who was iconic in the music business. He had signed Dolly Parton and Chris Christopherson when they were kids, and he built Monument Records. Anyway, he was producing Willie Nelson. And
right,
at that time, Willie had just had Lucas, his son, and his life was all up and crazy. He was moving from one marriage to another. It was just lots going on. So he wasn't writing. So I had this opportunity to write a song for Willie Nelson, who I was just massively a fan of.
yeah,
And I had 3 months to write it. And it had to be something he would sing. And that to me was one of my biggest shifts of becoming a professional songwriter, because it had to be something that felt true to me, but I also had to guise it in the style of Willie Nelson. So I picked up my guitar and I started playing On the Road Again just to get into the vibe. And, so when you're asked to write a song that is a specific assignment,
yeah,
it's yes, you need to do that if you want to be a professional songwriter. But then in that, you have to put your truth. You have to put something that could have been written by you in that process, which when you get those creative flow juices going, it will arrange itself. It took me 3 months to the day to write the song, but I did it. And it was really a really good song. And I was very proud of myself for sticking to it. And it ended up going to #1. So I can't complain about that. But I wasn't thinking about whether he was even going to cut it. When I got to wrestling with that song, I was like, I just want to get another rhyme for bow, for the name of the song was There's Nothing I Can Do About It Now.
yeah,
And I had to rhyme that every time. I'm like, what was I thinking? Oh my God, it's so hard. So I had all the obvious rhymes. And then I remember sitting there like 3 o'clock in the morning, pulling my hair out, trying to think, I have to have a fresh rhyme. And all of a sudden this little nursery rhyme came into my head. And this is what I'm talking about. This creative flow is actually dancing with you. It wants you to write this. It knows what the answer is. So I just sit there and go, bring it, please. Thank you for bringing me the next line. And all of a sudden I was thinking, when the bow breaks, the cradle will fall. Bow, Bough. So then I knew I had to get that word at the end of the line. And what's a bough? Well, I looked it up. Well, a bough is a part of a tree. And I thought, shoot, how am I going to get a part of a tree in this song? And I wrestled with that for about an hour. And I finally just flipped into my head like bing, because I was sitting there grunting along with nothing, nothing, nothing. And all of a sudden it was like bing. And it's the line, it says, and I've been dreaming like a child since the cradle broke the bow.
beautiful,
And there's nothing I can do about it now.
lovely.
And I was like dancing around, screaming at the top of my lungs with happiness.
That
One
is,
of the things I do in my writing is I just like a dog with a bone. I'm like, there is a rhyme. There's another rhyme. I'm just not thinking of it yet, but it will come. And I've waited 18 years for one word. So I'm a bit crazy about that kind of stuff. But man, when it comes in, it's the right one. It's
That
perfect.
feeling when you land that line,
Yeah.
that is an amazing feeling. It's kind of like winning a football trophy or something. It's just like
Yeah.
yes, it's very
Yeah.
true. So in collaboration, when you write with other people, what do you gain from working with other songwriters? You're obviously an amazingly loved songwriter yourself, but when you're working with someone else, because each moment, even if you've written with very successful people or new people, there's always something different that goes on. What do you enjoy about that process, and what do you gain from it, do you think?
Well, I love co-writing. And I just got back from co-writing at Chris Difford's. He
Okay.
had a retreat at Kennard House just recently.
Yes.
There were some incredible writers there that I'd never met before. And it's always just like getting a Christmas present, like who am I writing with tomorrow? I love going to Kennard House and doing those writing retreats with Chris. And this time I got to write with several new people that were just fantastic. And I don't read the bios. I don't really want to know what their successes are because sometimes that can actually shut me down a little bit. I'm like, oh, I got to write something really good with this person. So it's really kind of great to go in there blind. One of the people I loved writing with was Jamie Hartman, who wrote I'm only human after
Oh, great
all.
song. Great
I'm
song.
only human after all. Don't put the blame on me. He wrote Giant, and he wrote that song with that artist. Their name is Rag and Bone,
Yeah.
and a bunch of others. I mean, I went back and I Googled him after the fact. And I was like, whoa. But he was so delightful, super easy to write with, so brilliant, so fast.
Yeah.
Um, and there were several other people. It was a fantastic week. But you can get caught up in what somebody else has done, or whether they're successful. I mean, I would be just as excited to sit down with Ruby Doo, because when I heard her voice, and I probably you too, because I think you guys wrote the song together that I heard. Um, I just find that really fun and exciting to work with up and coming talented people who are still, and of any age, who are still just kind of forming their direction as a writer, because I have a lot of craft, but there's a freshness to a
Yeah.
young voice.
Yeah.
Young meaning a new voice. I mean, there's people that start writing in their 40s. So it's not about age, it's about embarking on this journey and starting to open to it. And there's a funny thing about people that are new to it. They don't know they don't know the rules. So they kind of go into areas that those of us who are more experienced might think, well, we won't go there, but maybe we will go there. Because in that room, there's this other weird, quirky thing
Yeah.
that we will use. Not the obvious thing, but there's this unobvious thing. And I was writing this past trip with Victoria Canal, who's an amazing artist, and she's out there right now opening up for Hoosier,
Brilliant.
having a blast. She's in her early 20s, very, very talented. And we were writing a song, and the melody was coming along, and I was throwing in this next section, and there was really cool melody, but she sort of went, can we play around with that melody there? And I'm thinking, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of like what that is, but yes, absolutely. And then she had this whole other melody, which I love now. It's my favorite part of the song. And I would have never ever gone there. That's what I love about co-writing, because it expands me to places I wouldn't normally go, and I fall in love with it. And it makes it like an adventure, and you realize you can really get kind of in a rut of your own style sometimes. So,
Yeah.
like, I love writing, like the song that we wrote with Jamie Hartman, and I think Tara. I think her last name is Austin. She's also a fantastic songwriter from LA. We ended up writing this thing. He's going to do it like a dance track, and I'd love to do more of that kind of stuff, because it's totally out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
But a
different
great song,
world.
I mean, a great song it doesn't matter what style it's in. If there's a song in there, then that's what I'm always seeking.
Absolutely. Um, who are your like main influences when you were growing up as songwriters? Who are the people? What songwriters do you think has really shaped you as a songwriter?
Well, I remember being really, really young, like 5 years old to 7 years old. And the main source of my musical interaction was whatever my parents put on the record player.
Yeah.
And I remember there being Tijuana Brass, Herb Alpert, and the Tijuana Brass album that had The Lonely Bull on it, which was this instrumental, but then this woman's voice goes, oh, and that just went, wow. And I started running around the house singing that. And I just fell in love with the music part right from that. And then they had these albums like Frank Sinatra, Edie Gourmet, Robert Goulet, and they were doing all the classic Gershwin tunes. And so I got a real deep dive into super, heavy duty songwriting level songs that were popular on the radio too. L is for the way you look at me. Those kind of songs that were
Mm.
pop that were coming through the 60s. They were very well crafted, melodically very fresh. And then there was all this Buddy Holly and the Beatles that hit right about the time I was starting to play guitar. And then Bob Dylan came along, and then I fell in love with, Fairport Convention, Judy Collins. I mean, one artist would lead me to another artist. Joni Mitchell, Carole King, all the singer-songwriters of the 70s, Motown.
Yeah.
So I loved all that stuff. And I learned how to play it, and I would, soak it in and just incorporate it into my DNA.
I think you're right there.
Um,
My mum and dad we used to drive quite a long way from where we lived up and to see relatives, and the radio would be on all the time. So I'd just have my face pressed against the cold glass, looking out at city lights at night.
yeah,
Let the radio do just
yeah,
be on, and in a funny kind of way that when you're just so open-minded when you're a kid, and you're just hearing song after song after song, which are all quality songs, that really does, in many ways, it teaches you how to write songs. It goes into your subconscious, doesn't it? Because you just soaked it in like
yeah,
at such an
absolutely.
early age.
And they would be playing Ode to Billy Joe, and then they would play Frank Sinatra, or it
Yeah.
was such a mixed bag. And I think you probably had that too there. I don't know what it's like now, because so many young people go to like a streaming service, and then if you listen to a certain artist, then you're going to get another artist sent to you that's like that artist. So
Yeah.
that's good, but sometimes the shock of something completely different would
Yeah.
really feed me, as a, like, I'd be listening to Julia by the Beatles, and then I'd be jumping over to Patsy Cline. It's just, it was a wonderful, varied kind of experience. I don't know how varied it is now, for
Yeah,
unless you're seeking it out,
it's interesting because my daughter's 19, so she's grown up with Spotify. Um, so she's
and
had
what is she finding? Is she finding
well,
music? Is she for
yeah,
it, or
she's kind of got a really great taste. I mean, her mother and I, obviously played her, or we've been singing together for years. So she's grown up in a musical household, writing songs,
oh
and so she's been played the classics as well. But
yeah,
there's also, I think she kind of found her own like lo-fi type of songwriter, like Matt DeMarco, a lot of people, Bieber, can't remember pronounce her name, but quite a few people like that. And but they've been brought up on the classics. So she
right,
kind of had a background in classics songwriting and artists, but she is very much into like the 70s. The 70s. Her mother
oh
is huge on disco and great
yeah,
songwriter. So she's got this big 70s, whether it's 70s film or 70s music, that's her thing. So that's obviously
yeah,
been an influence of us, but she's also kind of found artists online via like listening to Fleetwood Mac. It's been suggested some more modern artists. So I think in many ways it's quite like I remember dreaming as a kid thinking there must be some way in the future that you could just listen to all the songs in the world and not have to buy CDs. So in a kind of in a way it's like great because you can just access what you want as a writer, but obviously it has a traumatic impact on us as songwriters. But I think it is very
does
much
she listen to
online.
does she listen to Spotify or Apple Music, or which, do you know what streaming
Yeah,
service she listens to?
Spotify. Yeah, Spotify.
Okay, here's a tip. I just found this out.
Okay.
Spotify is the worst sounding. it does not really get all the frequencies. So my record, if you listen to it on Spotify, it sounds like an MP3 compared to if you go to Amazon Music or Apple or Tidal, of course, which is very, high level. But these other streaming services are starting to put them up at like 196K.
Yeah.
So that when you listen to it, even on headphones, you hear everything.
Yeah.
And I hope that Spotify will come to the party, because when I did not even notice it because I'm busy running around, but Ray Kennedy, who produced my album, he's a real master of sound. And he's like, don't listen on, listen on this one, listen on Amazon Music or one of these other ones. So if you get a chance, just compare them.
Yeah,
And
nice.
you might be blown difference,
I did actually do that.
Unfortunately, most of the industry has like, what are your Spotify numbers? There's kind of, it's
I
sort
know.
of taken over
It's not. I
the
don't like
main
all
thing.
that. That's the one thing about this time where I really don't like that, because, like you said about earlier about Vincent Van Gogh, it's like, well, if he was a musical artist, his streaming figures would be terrible. But
Yes.
you can't judge it on streaming figures. But I did
Yeah.
actually do a little comparison with Neil Young's Pono player when that was kind of a bit of a thing a few years ago, and that was sounding good compared to Spotify. So good
Yeah.
for listeners. Go and listen elsewhere and compare. And
Well, the thing is, Pono I love that Neil tried, but he was born to be an artist and a songwriter, and probably the parameters that would have been required for that thing to really take off, he didn't probably have inborn, but it did impress me. The difference did impress me. And I'm not really a stickler for that kind of stuff so much, but it was a huge difference. So if your daughter is listening to something, and just make sure she catches all the frequencies, all those beautiful frequencies when we record something in the studio. At least the world has moved on from MP3s for the most part. It's a little bit better than it was, but for a
yeah.
while there.
Let me just ask you a couple more questions, because I know I'm a bit aware of time, because I
Yeah,
know you want us to go on
that's
to.
all right.
When I started this podcast, I asked a few listeners who would they like me to talk to, and your name came up again and again and again and again. And
Really? All
yeah,
right.
people really keen to hear you talk about your process in songwriting. So this is a bit of a strange question, but if somebody had never heard your songs before, what three songs would you introduce them to as a way into the world of Beth Nielsen Chapman?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Which three songs? Let's see. I guess Sand and Water would be one of them,
Yeah,
because that song is kind of iconic to my um and I mean, it's like saying, which child would you pick?
yeah,
I can only go by what some of my favorite songs are.
yeah. Go.
There's a song, it's a song on the Deeper Still album that I love, that I wrote with Annie Roboff, called It All Comes Down to Love, or All Comes Down to Love is the name of it. Because the structure of that song is just I'm very proud of how that came out. And Annie, you know, she's just a genius with chords and how to get back to, how do we get from there to there, back to there.
Yeah.
And that one's one of my favorites because of that. And then it's just tough. I mean, I just have to just pick something off the top of my head. Let's see. Well, I would say Nothing I Can Do About It Now is one of the songs I'm the proudest of,
Fantastic.
because it's really it just became airtight.
Yeah.
And it used, it used perfect rhyme, and it just has a lot going on, and I managed to pull it off.
Fantastic. Well done. Brilliant. Great, great, great songs, all three of those. And two more questions. If you could give advice, I mean, you have given a lot of advice on this podcast so far, but if you were to give a direct piece of advice to a songwriter, someone who's new, what would you say to them?
I would say fall in love with finding your voice, and don't plant your seeds too close to the superhighway of the music business.
A lovely.
So there's a business model to learn. If you want to do this for a living, that's a learning curve. But if you don't have great songs, none of that matters.
Yeah.
So focus on finding a way to write the greatest songs you can. Rewrite, rewrite, rewrite. Now it's getting to be a long t-shirt, but it's very important to know that you are the only person who can write your songs and that you're brilliant. If you open to it and you allow that creative flow, full access to your being, and you work on your craft, nothing bad can happen from that. I can't guarantee you won't be at a time in your life when the popular artist is Picasso and not Van Gogh, but you can't attach the outcome. The outcome is not what it's about. It's about the outcome being just writing really sharp, brilliant, coherent songs. And then just, keep doing it. Just keep doing it.
Fabulous.
And you have to put yourself out there. The other thing I would say in terms of being in the world with your music, because nobody wants to sit in a room by themselves and do all that and not have a payoff, right? Build community with other writers, with other creative people. I mean, there's nobody that does it better than Chris Difford. But you can do your own version of that. You can literally find out who lives in your town who's also interested in songwriting, and you could have once a month start a club, start a little gathering. We're going to have 5 people, then you're going to have 10 people, then you're going to have to find a bigger venue, because everybody I've ever seen that does that in Nashville, it ends up being a thing. And young, starving, clueless songwriters fall off the turnip truck every day in Nashville, and they're looking for places to play their songs. And they're looking for places where they can get in front of other people. So that kind of thing can be really very, very much feed you as a songwriter. Just the community, sense of community.
I think so. I think it's important to be inspired by icons, but also to hear people write weekly or daily that are around you, and to keep you kind of focused on what you're doing. Okay, final question, and thank you so much for your time. And
sure thing. I want to say something quickly, is that every minute there's another Jimmy Webb or Joni Mitchell forming, and they're everywhere, and they're forming right now. So once you open that door, you'll meet them, and then you get to know them as they're going up, Anyway, so sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you.
Your last question.
Thank you so much for your time, and
you're
I'm
welcome.
a huge fan of your songwriting, and thank you. So I ask people this question, and it will change from day to day, but if you could have written any song which isn't one of your songs, written by someone else, the song that you would have had to wrestle with in bed, or enjoy coming very quickly, or however it turned up, what song by somebody else would you have loved to have spent time with, and would you love to have written?
Well, there are many, but one that goes to the top of the list is Wichita Lemon.
Yeah.
And when Jimmy Webb asked me to sing at his wedding to his lovely bride, Laura, I was so honored. I was like, oh my God, of course, which one of your songs do I get to sing? And he goes, Beth, I don't write happy love songs. You're going to have to sing one of your songs. I'm like, what? I mean, how stand up at Jimmy Webb's wedding and sing not a Jimmy Webb song? He goes, because my wife wants to hear Look, which is another song that I wrote with Andy Bay. And I was like, oh my God, okay. And it was still an honor to sing, but I would have loved to have sung Wichita Lineman, but it's not really a wedding song. So
true. But it's a fantastic.
I get why he wanted
one of the best ever. So you're on tour at the moment. You come back from tour.
I am. I'm coming to I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but if it's before my tour, then okay. Well, then let's mention my tour. I'm coming over, and I'm playing. You can just go to my website, BethNielsenChapman.com, to get the particulars. But I'm playing in London at Nell's on the 4th of August, and then I'm coming over and playing Lyme Regis, I believe, on the 2nd, and then I'm in Wales at I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember, but it's all on my website under tour, and I'll definitely be at Nell's. And in fact, are you near London?
No, I'm actually. I will see you in Lyme Regis. I'm down that neck of the woods, so I'm planning to.
Great. Yeah. All right. So, well, let us know if you want tickets. I'm happy to get that arranged for you, because I don't have any tons of people I know in Lyme Regis. So thank you for spreading.
We shall spread the word in these parts and get some people there.
Well, we can put you on the guest list.
Oh, very kind of you. Thank you.
Anyway, so. And we end up, and I'm doing that lovely Under the Stars festival that Kate Rusby puts on. That's, I think, the 6th and 7th of August. And then on the 8th of August, we'll be at the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh.
Fantastic.
And we're we're going to rope the lovely Gregor Philp into coming into the band on that one. Gregor's from Deep Blue. You might know
Yeah,
Gregor.
he's great. He's really great.
So yeah, it'll be great fun. It's a little mini tour, but it'll be wonderful to come back over. So.
And loving the new single as well, by the way, Back to This Moment is great, really great. So everybody who's
Yeah.
listening, go and check out Beth's website and get yourself a ticket, buy yourself an album. And if you're going to stream it, do it on a good streaming service. Thank you, Beth, for your time. You've been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'll see you over there. I'm going to put you on my guest list for Lyme Regis.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.